Alright guys, welcome back to JBSR Plays It. I know this video, or this podcast was supposed to go up yesterday, but it didn't happen because I felt like crap. Still kind of feel like crap, but whatever. Gotta push through it, I guess. Also, this is my last day to record it for the rest of the weekend, so this is it. Was there any big stories that came out this week besides Brandon Marshall calling out Jay Cutler, which I don't really care about? I feel like there was something. Looks like it's just all people who are talking about Jay Cutler. Let's see. Amobi Okoye is actually back at practice, which is... I don't know if he's going to make the team. It's just a nice story considering he spent 3 months of last year in a coma. And he's only... I think he's only like... Does it say it on here? He's only like 25. Like 24, 25. Like, he's still young, so... Realistically, he could have a decent career ahead of him. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, there's not really anything big. You know, Gerald McCoy called out the Buccaneers, which is kind of funny. Especially when you consider, and I didn't realize this, looking at their schedule, realistically, I know Tampa Bay is considered the easy person on a lot of team schedule at 1-5, and I can tell you right now when I'm doing my power rankings, I'm looking at them at bottom of the barrel. Their schedule coming up: versus Minnesota, at Cleveland, versus Atlanta, at Washington, at Chicago, versus Cincinnati, at Detroit, at Carolina, versus Green Bay, and versus New Orleans. What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 winnable games in that stretch. If you look at it that way, because I consider Chicago winnable, and I consider Carolina and New Orleans winnable. Because New Orleans has not looked very good. Carolina hasn't, besides Cam Newton, hasn't really looked too great. And Chicago's all over the freaking place. So you never know what kind of week you're going to catch them in. And after last week, you got to consider Cleveland a fairly winnable game. So yeah, they're 1-5 right now, and they have a legitimate shot at getting to 8-8, which might be enough to take this division. A lot of people are joking at 6-10 might do it, and I don't think they will. Considering Carolina's already at 3 wins, you got to get to at least 7 or 8 wins, I would think, to win this division. And someone might rattle off some wins. New Orleans. They got Green Bay this week. They got at Carolina, San Francisco, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Carolina, Chicago, Atlanta, Tampa Bay. New Orleans is half a game up. No, 1 game up. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, they're 2-4. They're 1 game up on Tampa Bay, and they've got a slightly more difficult schedule. They could fall behind Tampa. Carolina versus Seattle, who's going to be pissed, versus New Orleans, at Philly, versus Atlanta, at Minnesota, at New Orleans, versus Tampa, versus Cleveland, at Atlanta. I mean, Carolina has a fairly winnable schedule. I think Carolina should be the favorite for this division, because I think they can get to 9-6-1. They got 3 wins. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can get to 9-6-1. I think, I think they lose to Seattle this week. I think they lose to Philly, and I think they split New Orleans. And other than that, I think they've got winnable games. So, and then just Atlanta's looked terrible. Atlanta doesn't field a defense. And I didn't realize this. The Detroit game this week is at 9:30 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, because they're playing in London. So it's a home game, but it's not a home game. And this isn't going to change my pick, but they're playing at 9:30 in the morning. That's a football game. I might have to get my cable hooked up. I might actually be able to watch that game. First game of the year I get to watch is Detroit at Atlanta. What a terrible, terrible game. And if Detroit doesn't get their offense turned around then they never will. But they got Detroit at Tampa, at Carolina, versus Cleveland, versus Arizona, at Green Bay, versus Pittsburgh, at New Orleans, versus Carolina. They've pretty much got... So what are they now? They are 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're 2-5. So they've got 11 games left. No, my math is backwards. They've got 9 games left, and 5 of those are in their own division. This could be a tough division to win because I think everyone will be separated by 2 games if everything breaks right. I think everyone, at least Atlanta, Carolina, and New Orleans, will be separated by 2 games. But I think the top dog will be 9-6-1, and that's assuming they win the games they should. Because I think Atlanta, they got to be in all these division games because they're equally as terrible. You got home for Cleveland, could go either way. Home for Arizona, could go either way. I like Arizona, but they're definitely a better home team. At Green Bay, that's a loss. Versus Pittsburgh, who knows? And this week versus Detroit in London. I don't think either one of those teams had an advantage in that game, but I think Detroit, with the number 1 overall defense, and Atlanta with just no defense whatsoever, I don't think they win that game. So NFC South is not looking good. But with that said, there's a lot of teams not looking good. The standings are just in shambles right now. You've got the NFC Beast. Was the NFC Beast looking like it at one point. It's just down to Dallas and Philly. The Giants have fallen back. I still think they can make a run maybe at 9-7, 10-6, but I don't think they're in contention for the division right now. The NFC North, Detroit and Green Bay are running away with it. Chicago's inconsistent. Minnesota is still, they're just a team in rebuilding. They have been, but I think now they just have to accept that fact. They whiffed on a left tackle, it seems like. They have no, their running back's out, and good for Asiata and, I'm sorry, I know the other guy's better, I just forgot his name. Whatever. But, you got to look at running back as a position in need. You got to look at wide receiver as a position in need, offensive line. Basically, you've only got your quarterback solved, and I don't know what they got going on defense. There's some questions there. You got the South, which is, we already went over, it's a disaster. You got the West with Arizona at 5-1 winning that division with a comfortable lead. San Francisco, and listening to Bill Simmons making his return, pointed out something that I think I had in the back of my mind the whole time, but I just didn't really actually want to admit, although I might have admitted it. I just want to see the 49ers fail because of the whole Harbaugh thing. Because it's going to be really tough to see this team make the playoffs and make a solid run to a conference championship, to the Super Bowl, or hell, even winning the Super Bowl with all this drama going around. And it's not... I'm not against Harbaugh in all of this. That's the big thing I want to emphasize. I'm not against Harbaugh. I'm against this situation. This is ridiculous. How do you have a guy lead you to 4 straight conference championships and you're going to complain about him? I understand that he's tough to work with, but... meanwhile, you got Rex Ryan 1-6 with the Jets, and there are people who still think he's going to hold on to his job after this year. I don't think Rex is the problem there, but that's what I'm rooting against, is just what the hell are you doing? And then you got Seattle at 3-3 and St. Louis at 2-4. That division is a lot tighter than you think, and St. Louis is a better looking 2-4 team than that record implies. You got an undrafted guy at quarterback who Brett Favre came out and said that he should start because he could be the next Warner or Brady, which I wouldn't go that far, but his stats don't look terrible. He definitely looks serviceable. I think you get rid of Bradford and just let Austin Davis run it. Draft the guy if you can pick him, but it seems like St. Louis has just had 2 first-round picks every single year. But if you don't see anything you like, I wouldn't stretch. I'd let Austin Davis take it over for another year, see what you got with him. AFC East, I know it's only a 1-game lead, but New England's running away with that. They're 5-2. The Bills are 4-3. Miami's 3-3. The Jets are 1-6. Jets could easily run a good amount of these last games. Bills have no excuse not to get to at least 9 wins this year. They should at least... they might not make the playoffs. They could. Right now, your wild card teams would be San Diego and Cincinnati. Buffalo should be able to make a run at one of those wild card spots, but I don't trust my team. And Miami's looked pretty decent ever since they almost talked about benching Tannehill, so that just sucks. I don't think Philbin should have kept his job after last year. And in the Jets, they could just run. They could still go 7-9, 8-8. It's Rex Ryan. They'll never be able to fire that. They'll never be able to justify firing that guy. Especially now, they got Percy Harvin. This will be interesting to watch. Now Geno Smith has no excuses because you've got Jason Morrow at tight end, who's, he's a rookie, but he's showing some flashes. You got Eric Decker being able to sort of be that number 2 guy, which is where he's a little more comfortable. He's not a guy who can fight double coverages. He can be your number 1 producer, but you need a bigger threat on the field, and that's what Percy Harvin is. So even if Percy Harvin is just fielded as a freaking decoy for the rest of the season, it's something. And in that defense, it's going to be good. The Jets made a crucial trade that could pay huge dividends. I think they're in too much of a hole to seriously make a playoff run, but I think they can at least ruin a lot of team seasons, including my Bills, who they're facing this week. AFC North, you got Baltimore running away at 5-2, Cincinnati free falling 3-2-1, Pittsburgh, who knows, at 4-3, and Cleveland blowing it down at 3-3 again. AFC North, though, the only division where everyone is over 500. And, that'll sort itself out. I still don't want to believe in Baltimore. I still thought they had another year left to sort of put some pieces together, but they're proving me wrong. Cincinnati, everyone, including me, was crowning them as the best team at 3-0, and now they're 0-2-1. Pittsburgh's up and down and all over the freaking place, and Cleveland is just... They're overachieving on a lot of levels. So, if they finish the season 8-8, it cannot be deemed a failure by any means. AFC South, Indianapolis is 5-2 when no one cares about the rest of the teams. Houston's 3-4. They've been shooting themselves in the foot. They start off 3-1. They've lost 3 straight. It's... J.J. Watt is out of the MVP talk just because they're losing so much now. And if you're going to be a defensive MVP, which has happened maybe, twice in league history, you're not going to do it on a losing team. You got to be Lawrence Taylor back in the 80s winning Super Bowls. Tennessee is starting Zach Mettenberg this week, which they were talking about doing last week. Now they're actually doing... And that is going to ruin that young man's career. And Jacksonville is no longer winless. And that is the highlight of Jacksonville's season. And in the AFC West, Denver, and we'll get to that game in a second, putting their seal on that division. They're at 6-1, and that one was in overtime against the Seahawks. San Diego's at 5-3, holding on to that first wild card spot. Kansas City looking tough at 3-3, and Oakland... the best-looking 0-6 team I think I've ever seen. Looking competitive in all of their games. Sorry. With my power rankings, I am going to go through, and I'm not going to look at records. I'm going to go through, I'm going to take into account every single win. I'm going to look at whether it was a blowout, because Baltimore is 5-2, but 3 of those games were blowouts in their favor. Their point differential is plus 89. That's the best in the league. Indianapolis is plus 80 and Denver is plus 82. Baltimore is plus 89. So they win in blowouts. That's going to be taken into account. Buffalo, 4-3, and 6 out of those 7 games could have gone either way, roughly. For most of the game anyways. I mean, that New England game, it was 1 score, and they put it, they nailed that coffin shut at the end. A lot of these games could go either way. Oh, wait, no, what was that San Diego game? I feel like the San Diego game wasn't close either. So, a lot of this will be taken into effect. New England gets blown out in one of their losses and then blows them out in another one. So it's, all of that is going to be factored in, and we'll see. I might even make up sub-standings, and I'm going to reference them again, but Bill Simmons went through and actually made undisputed wins, undisputed losses, and games that could have gone either way as the standings, and really just helped divide it up. And obviously Oakland's going to be at the bottom no matter what because they have 0 wins, but I feel like let's just look at them real quick. I'm going to use them as an example. All right, so you've got a loss by 5 points to the Jets. So that could have gone either way relatively. Houston, they lose by 16. Okay, so that's one legitimate loss. Touchdown loss to New England, so I'm going to call, anything under one score is a close game, so that could have gone either way. Miami, they lost by 24. Yeah. San Diego by a field goal. And in Arizona, this one 11 points. So, realistically, they could be 3-3. A couple other breaks their way. They're 0-6, but they don't look it. Miami's really the only true blowout. I feel like in Arizona and Houston, those are some garbage time touchdowns that sort of increase the lead. I'll probably check box scores and stuff. I'll actually do, hardcore research because I'm on vacation and I can afford to do that. So, 15 minutes of that spent basically previewing what's going to happen next week. And let's start going over the schedule. And let's actually start up season number 2. Oh, before we do, season number 2 with the Bucs. So, obviously, all the offseason, I have no input into that. I don't want to go into that. So I was looking through my roster because I wanted to see what was going on. So on the roster, Mike Glennon is still here as my backup. Obviously, I'm a 99 overall. So I was looking at halfback, and I knew Doug Martin was going to be number 1. We got this rookie down here, the 76, but in the middle, we got Reggie Bush. They went out and signed Reggie Bush. I don't even want him on the team. I want Deshaun Curry there. I wanted to build him up a bit. But no, I got to go through at least one season of Reggie Bush. So that's terrific. Our fullback only has 2 vowels in his entire name. Kyle Juszczyk. Kyle Krzyzewski, for all I know. I'm cool with that. 89 overall. They want to run a receiver all the time, and I'm going to use him to block. Wide receivers, Jackson and Evans. They gave me Austin Pettis. And then a couple other guys who I don't. And Russell Shepard is still here. So I didn't really want what's his face back, but they downgraded me. I had Earl Bennett, and they actually managed to downgrade. I was hoping for someone sort of young to put in the slot, but no. But tight end, they got me. I said I wanted Stoker gone, and they got me Jordan Cameron, so I will be happy with that. And Safarian Jenkins, I'm sorry, man. Hopefully in real life it works out better, but in Madden, you're toast. You are 4th on the depth chart. John Carlson, Luke Stoker, and Jordan Cameron at top. So I've got some weapons at tight end. I finally remember to turn injuries off, but not until after I finished the preseason. So literally 3 out of my 5 offensive linemen are on injured reserve right now. So this will be fun. Defense, they added OCU Manura. Michael Johnson's still there. Gerald McCoy is a beast. The linebackers or whatever. Cornerback. So I was making fun of that cornerback that they drafted, and he's already starting because there's no one else there. So maybe some of these defensive players will actually develop, but this is the new age Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we are going to just be an offensive juggernaut and screw defense. So let's get the season underway, and let's get this Week 8 review or preview going. But first, I missed the Denver-San Diego game because I didn't put this up in time. I went on Twitter. I always do this. If this ever goes up late, you can check my Twitter. I always put my picks up there. I picked Denver because I couldn't pick against Peyton Manning after the last couple games he's had. And once again, I think he's got, 10 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in his last 3 games. He wasn't included in the MVP talk this whole season so far. It's been about Phillip Rivers and now Andrew Luck coming up, DeMarco Murray, J.J. Watt, and now it's like, okay, you know what? I think Peyton's just going to take what's rightfully his. I think by the end of the season, we're looking at Peyton Manning as MVP, and I do think that he gets the 2nd ring at the end of this year. But I don't think he goes off into the sunset. I think he comes back, although you've got Daniel Thomas, Demaryius Thomas, and Wes Welker all on the last year of their deals. Realistically, he could be looking at losing 2 of those guys. But luckily, Peyton Manning is the developer, and he can get over that because he still has Emmanuel Sanders. San Diego, put up a decent enough game, I guess. It's unfortunate they've lost 2 straight, but that's just kind of what happens. They lost a close game last week, and it wasn't close at all this week. So I don't think any less of San Diego. Like I said, I picked Denver to win the Super Bowl this year. I don't think any less of San Diego. It's just, it was at Denver, so hopefully they split. If they can get that, they've got their home game against them left, so maybe they can try and split, and that'll, or at least keep it close next time. I don't think it matters. I think Denver's got that division on a silver platter already. I think that is game over unless Peyton Manning gets injured or something ridiculous like that happens. And Peyton Manning just adding to that touchdown record. He might get to 600 by the time it's all said and done. He might be sitting at he's at 513 right now. He's still got a half a season to play. He's got more. He's only played 7 games. He's got 9 more games. Realistically, I think he's at like 23 touchdowns or something right now. Realistically, would anyone be surprised if he hit another 50 touchdowns and is sitting there at the end of the year at something like 545 touchdowns and is looking at next year as maybe hitting 600? I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't know that anyone should be. So let's move on to the actual preview, and we'll start off against my order I have on this chart. Because the first game, obviously, is the Detroit Lions at Atlanta at Wembley Stadium in London at 9:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, which means that nice and early 6:30 for you guys on the West Coast. And I would apologize, but I'm not going to, because you guys sleep through it. Who cares? Unless you play fantasy football, just who cares? I already sort of talked about this. Detroit has one of the best defenses. Atlanta has no defense. Calvin Johnson probably not playing in this one, I would assume. And I don't think he's going to be necessary. I mean, they've been winning without him. They haven't looked good, but they've been winning without him. So I think the smart money is obviously I'm picking Detroit on this, and I just legitimately think that's just, you'd be dumb not to. Atlanta, they might put up some yards. They might make that defense not look as good. But this is a true question because Atlanta's been depending on their offense. Detroit's been depending on their defense. One of those things has to give. And my money would be on the defense holding strong. Because I think if Detroit can put up 20 points, that'll get them a victory. And I think that's all that, I think that should be it. But yeah, it is funny. I don't know what the other London games are. I know there's one more, and I'm assuming it's Jacksonville because we've already had Miami and Oakland. We've just had some they want a team in London. Give them some games that they actually want to watch. You really want to go balls out. Put Denver and Seattle out there as the Super Bowl rematch. Let them play on a neutral field again and just let them go at it. But no, that would be a little too overambitious. So yeah, I'm sorry, London, for you guys getting some terrible games, but this isn't even real football to you people, so it's cool. Next up, we got the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. I'm picking Buffalo, and I'm not confident in this at all. The Jets have really started to respond ever since, basically everything went to shit. And they almost had New England last week, and they played pretty good against Denver. And Buffalo looked terrible last week. So this one, if the Jets are going to make a run, they've got to win this one. I don't know what the Jets' offensive line looks like. I'm hoping it's pretty terrible. Because if the Bills can get some pressure, then it would be a safe bet in Buffalo's favor for that. Because Geno Smith, I don't know how he looks under pressure, but I can't imagine he stays in the pocket long enough to even consider Percy Harvin. It's just the Bills haven't exactly looked strong offensively, and you're going against what has consistently been a really good defense. Can we get a challenge on that? That hat. Okay, I guess not. I'm not a coach. I can't challenge that myself, can I? No. This is a must-win for both of these teams because Buffalo really needs all of these games against the easy opponents if they want any chance of the playoffs. Because they've got some tough ones coming up, but they've got, they barely won a game they should have won easily last week. They got New York, and they're going into a bye, and they come back with Kansas City, who has sort of been back and forth, but overall, it's a playoff team from last year with a really good head coach, even if he makes some bonehead decisions sometimes. And then you're at Miami, and they're another one, 2 games in a row with teams that they could go either way. The Bills could blow both of those teams out. The Bills could get blown out by both teams, or it could be a close game. And I wouldn't be surprised no matter what. Then you got the Jets again at home. You got Cleveland, again, another bonehead team, at Denver versus Green Bay, at Oakland, and at New England. Buffalo has to sweep both games against the Jets, and they have to win that other one against Miami. And they have to beat Oakland. These are things they have to do if they want to compete at all. Not only for a playoff spot, just to get over 500. Over 500, and I'm happy with that. At 500, I'm happy with that. But if they go 6-10, heads will roll. Next up, we've got the Missouri Bowl. You got St. Louis at Kansas City. I'm going with Kansas City here, but I think this is a sleeper for the better game of the week. You got Philly at Arizona, but who knows where that can go. And that's about it. That's besides San Diego and Denver, those are the only enticing games on the schedule. I think this could be a decent matchup because I like what Jeff Fisher's doing with St. Louis with a underperforming defense, with a quarterback who I don't even think was in Madden at the beginning of the year. I think he was one of those people they had to add in on a roster update. That's their quarterback right now. They're 2-4. They're competitive. They blew that big lead against Dallas. There's a lot at stake here. Both of these teams, realistically, whichever team loses this is out of the playoffs, I feel. If the Rams lose, they'd be 2-5. They're done. If Kansas City loses, they're 3-4. And that will basically lock them into third place in their own division. And that is not a position you want to be in heading into the midpoint of your season. But this could be a really good matchup. This one I'm actually I would suggest watching if you don't have any of your teams playing that week. Next up, we got the Houston Texans, the Tennessee Titans. Titans starting Zach Mettenberger. J.J. Watt is going to have a fucking field day. This is going to be a massacre by Houston, or at least it better be. If Houston can't win, if they can't go 4-2 in their division, even if they blow, and they probably will lose to the Colts later on, but even if they get blown out by the Colts, and it'll be at Colts. They got 2 games against Jacksonville. They got 2 games against Tennessee. That should get them up to 7-9 right there, at least. And I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like. They have to win this because being guaranteed basically 4 more wins on your schedule, you're only realistically at that point looking to win 3 more out of the other 5, and even 2 more out of the other 5. And you'd still be over 500 and in the conversation. So this is a huge game for Houston. Tennessee, I'm sorry, Ken Wisenhunt. You got your win last week, and I think you should just be happy with that. Next up, there's not really much else to say about that. It's just a matter of if Houston loses, do we see Ryan Mallett? And that's really the only story coming out of it. Next up, we got Minnesota at Tampa Bay. I'm taking Minnesota in this game. And And that's only because Gerald McCoy can call out his team all he wants. But at the end of the day, there's 11 players on defense, and him and Altron Werner are the only ones who are any good. And I'm not even 100% sure if Werner's been good so far this year, or if he was just supposed to be good. Gerald McCoy obviously is a beast no matter what. You know, it's him and Sue, who ironically were in the same draft. I think did they go 1-2? I don't remember. Those are the two best defensive tackles in the league. And you can throw Darius in there. You can throw, Kyle Williams as well. There are pretty good defensive tackles in the league, but overall, I mean, it comes down to McCoy and Sue, and then there's a distant gap. So he's a one-man wrecking crew, and Minnesota has no offensive line. But because the rest of the defense looks terrible, I like Teddy Bridgewater to sort of get things together and sort of put together a good game and be like, hey, this is why I should be considered the best rookie quarterback right now, which I don't think is true. My money's going to be on Derek Carr, but I'm going to be a little biased on that for a while. But yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay, they need to win this game, but I just don't think they can do it. But they need to win this game, because if they do not win this game, they are done. Even in a terrible division, they are done. Next up, we have Seattle Seahawks at the Carolina Panthers. Seahawks have looked bad. Not even like, oh, they were good and they lost to a better team. Like, they just haven't looked good. And they got rid of Percy Harvin. And I fail to see that being addition by subtraction, because you already lost Golden Tate, and Marshawn Lynch is starting to look like a running back approaching his 30s, who's been carrying a heavy workload for most of his career. But I still like Seattle in this game, because Carolina, it's just Cam Newton to Kelvin Benjamin all game. That's all it is. And if Seattle can stop that with the Legion of Boom, if they can play up to where they're supposed to be, they don't even have to have a run defense. They don't even have to field. They can just drop 11 people back. They don't even have to stop a running back, because I don't even know who the hell is playing for him at this point. And we can get into the whole details about Carolina paying way too much for basically number two running backs. But instead of getting into that, let's just Seattle should win this game. This should provide them an opportunity for a bounce-back game. And if they lose this game, there is reason to panic in Seattle. Right now they can still go 11-5. Their defense hasn't looked as good as they did last year, but it doesn't mean they can't turn things around. They just gotta get one win and then connect that with another one. A 3-game winning streak, and I don't know what their schedule looks like, but I have the technology to pull it up. If it loads. You got Carolina, Oakland, New York, Kansas City. You're at Carolina, home for Oakland, home for the Giants, and at Kansas City. They could run and go 4-0 in those games and get back up to 7-3. And then their game after that would be home for Arizona, and then at San Francisco, at Philly, home for San Fran, at Arizona, and then home for St. Louis in the finale. They could still enter that stretch 7-3 and be in a comfortable position, because one of these days, shit is not going to go well for Arizona. They are overcoming way too much, and eventually it can't go that way all season. I mean, I still think they're a very well-coached team, and I think they can still make a playoff spot. I think they can still get to 10-6, 11-5, and get a wild card. But I think that might be all they do, because there's a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and that's their strength. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Seattle, this is time to turn it around. This is time for at least 3. Even if you think Kansas City is going to be a tough game, at least rattle off 3, because the Giants are all over the place. Or even 3 of 4 is fine. even 6-4 going into that stretch of games, because that's where you test. You're going to have to. You got Philadelphia sandwiched between the two San Francisco games, because the scheduling people are dicks. And conveniently enough, wouldn't you know it, they just in time for Aldon Smith to get back is when Seattle gets both games against the 49ers. I don't know, Seattle. Next up, Baltimore Ravens at Cincinnati Bengals. The easiest game for me to pick, because I will pick against Baltimore, and I will pick for Cincinnati. This is the deciding game for this division. And I know it's a lot, it's hyperbole or whatnot to be like, oh, you're going to decide a division in week 8. Yes. Yes, we are. Or maybe not. This could, is what I should say. If Baltimore wins here, that's it for Cincinnati. They would be 3-3-1, 0-3-1 in their last 4. And Baltimore will be sitting at 6-2. And Baltimore at Pittsburgh, home for Tennessee, at New Orleans versus San Diego, at Miami versus Jacksonville, at Houston versus Cleveland after this. They've already lost to Cincinnati, so they would split the games, but they've got a favorable schedule coming up. I mean, realistically, you're looking at San Diego as the only true loss coming up for that team, and that could be a competitive game. I mean, if Baltimore wins this, 13-3 is not out of the realm of possibility. And you look at Cincinnati, versus Jacksonville, versus Cleveland, at New Orleans, at Houston, at Tampa, versus Pittsburgh, at Cleveland, versus Denver, and at Pittsburgh. And that Denver game is the deciding factor. They could both put on a good run of games, but the consolation prize is Baltimore gets San Diego, and Cincinnati gets Denver. Which of those games is more winnable right now? I'll give you a hint. It's the Chargers. So it's... I don't know. It's a bigger game for Cincinnati. Because, Baltimore can overcome this. If they lose, they can overcome it. And at this point, tiebreakers no longer apply to the Bengals because of that tie. So that doesn't even factor in. Having 2 wins against Baltimore realistically doesn't help them in any tiebreaker situation. It just helps them having 2 wins over a division opponent. It's the only time where a moral victory will apply. And I guess the sad news when it comes to the Bengals is that the Devon Still jerseys are no longer on sale on their pro shop. And I never bought one. And I will kick myself for that for quite a while. I meant to. I was going to. But just having a baby, things pop up. I never got around to it. He's doing giveaways and everything. It's hard-pressed for me to get... I would do it, but it's not the jersey itself that I wanted. It's knowing that I bought a jersey and it helped out a cause. So I will probably just make a donation to that charity at some point in the future. Because I felt like that was the more important thing. Having the Devon Still jersey would have been nice, but I probably never would have worn it. I probably would have just framed it. But it was all about the cause. It was all about the cause. And his daughter is still all over Instagram taking selfies, so she's doing well. So, in the grand scheme of things, 0-2-1 in the last 3 weeks means way less considering little Leia Still is doing well. Next up, we've got the Miami Dolphins at the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Miami Dolphins are looking hot. The Jacksonville Jaguars got their win, and they can call it a season because no one's going to care if they go 1-15. It's going to be a terrible season, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be a historically terrible season. So they're done. They're good for the year. Miami, on the other hand, if you think that the Jets will beat the Bills, and the line is that the Jets will win, and it should be, because the Jets have been playing better, but we never know with Geno Smith. Is he going to be good, Geno? Because we've seen that like 3 times maybe. Or is he going to be bad Geno, which we see almost every week? If the Jets beat the Bills and Miami wins here, Miami jumps into second place right there. And right in the talk, especially if Cincinnati goes down, they're right in the talks for that wild card spot. So this is a big game for Miami and an easy one, luckily for them. So I think Miami should take care of business. They have no excuse not to. Like I said, and Jacksonville, it's just they got their win. They're done. They're good. I'm sure they'll win 1 or 2 or 3 more games. Because I don't think they're as terrible a team as 1-6 implies. They haven't been competitive in their games. I still think they've been blown out in most of these games. Let's see, Jacksonville taking advantage of technology. Shane is finally catching up. Okay, 17-point loss, 31-point loss, 24-point loss, or no, 27-point loss, 21-point loss, 8-point loss, 2-point loss. Of those 6 losses, 4 of them were pretty handedly. And if you want to go technically, the first 5 games, they lost all by more than 1 score, unless you take into account 2-point conversions. And then they beat Cleveland. But pretty handedly, that was 24-7. That wasn't, or 24-6. It wasn't like they won on a last-second field goal, like they controlled that game. But Jacksonville just has not. They're sitting at the bottom of the power rankings. I'm looking at that now. They're sitting at the bottom of the power rankings. Because Tampa Bay, let's see, 6 points, 2 points, 42 points, a win, 6 points, and then 31 points. Two of their losses were complete blowouts. That is a way better ratio. So, yeah, Jacksonville sitting at the bottom of the power rankings. But, again, there's still one more game to be played before I actually make my final list. So, yeah. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears at the New England Patriots. Chicago's got to get their shit together. This is not the week they're going to do it. You got Brandon Marshall calling out Jay Cutler, and everyone always said that Jay Cutler and Brandon Marshall were like a match made in heaven. Well, that marriage is over. I can't really say it's over. It's not looking very good right about now. It's just, if you're going to turn this around, you're not going to do it against a red-hot Patriots team. How did Cameron catch that? Never mind, I don't want to know. I think I'm going for a record. I think that's why they still have me throwing the ball. That is a lot of passing yards. 559, 7 touchdowns. Yeah, okay. But yeah, this Miami's just looking to continue to try and just erase any doubt that they're going to win this division. And there's very little left now. That one game hiccup. I still overall don't like this team as a Super Bowl contender because you're banking basically on Gronk to still be there at the end of the year. You're banking on Edelman and all these guys. It's still not a favorable position for New England given their roster. But that said, it at least this division, and maybe Miami and Buffalo might be a little more scrappy. And I would not be shocked if we look at it at the end of the year and see the worst team in this division only being 7-9. And again, that would be the Jets. And seeing the Bills at 8-8 or so, and Miami at like 9-7, and the Patriots at like 10-6 or 11-5. Which is like, oh, that means, they win it handily. Well, no, because everyone gave them 12-4 to start the year. And that's not the case. And 10-6 wouldn't surprise me with the Patriots. The Bears, on the other hand, they're 3-4, and they still have Cutler. This is usually what they do when he gets hurt. They usually start off good, Cutler gets hurt, and then that's the end of the season. And they're, I'm looking at New England's schedule right now. You got Chicago this week, so that should be a win. Even if Jay Cutler's on his game, I still don't think that'll be enough. Then again, Matt Forte, let him run up the middle because the Patriots have proven that Gerard Mayo missing is really hurting them. You've got Denver next week at Indy versus Detroit, who should have Calvin Johnson back at that point. At Green Bay, at San Diego versus Miami, at the Jets, and versus Buffalo. I'm sorry, do we feel confident that they're winning 6 or 7 of those games? Because I'm not. I'm looking at Denver as a loss. At Indianapolis, that could be a loss. Versus Detroit, that could be a loss. At Green Bay, that could be a loss. At San Diego, that could be a loss. And that gets them down in the 10-6 range. And that's where I think they win this division, but I don't think it'll be as convincingly as they have in years past. And for shits and giggles, Miami, what do you got? You have at Jacksonville versus San Diego, at Detroit versus Buffalo, at Denver, at New York versus Baltimore, at New England versus Minnesota versus New York. Miami doesn't exactly have the most favorable schedule either. But they could still be looking at 9-7. 3, so let's see. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 if they lose to the Patriots. And assuming they beat the Bills, who they've already lost to. And that was the Bills' one convincing win. And then Chicago. Let's just see. Let's say Jay Cutler does actually play the rest of the year. What do we got? We got New England and then a bye, and then at Green Bay versus Minnesota versus Tampa, at Detroit versus Dallas versus New Orleans versus Detroit, at Minnesota. Goodbye. I don't like Chicago in most of those games. I like Chicago to maybe get to 6-10. You figure the 2 Minnesotas, the Tampa, and then the New Orleans game could go either way. The only advantage is that it's on the road for New Orleans in December. So maybe even 7-9, but with a healthy Jay Cutler, 7-9 would be their best case scenario. If Jay Cutler gets hurt, 5-11 is not out of the realm of possibility for this team. So, I'm sorry, Chicago, you just blew too many chances too early. Next up, we got Philadelphia at Arizona. I'm taking Philly, and this is the toughest game to call. My thinking of taking Philly, I think Carson Palmer looks better than Nick Foles. Let me just make that clear. But Philly has looked really good the last couple of weeks. They look like they finally figured everything out. So, and Arizona, like I said, they keep overcoming, and this will be a competitive game. This is not going to be a blowout. But I think Arizona, I think their little run, I think it's coming to an end. And that's unfortunate. I'm going to root for Arizona all the way. But at the end of the day, I can't pick against Philly in this one. It wouldn't surprise me if Arizona does. That's just what they do. They just win when you don't think they're going to. This will be an interesting game to watch. That offensive line for Philly is starting to look better. And just Arizona. They've got all these injuries, but yet, you look around and they're overcoming it. And a couple of their big ones, Carson Palmer's back. And he's looked pretty good. Not going to say he's looked amazing, but he's looked good. So next up, we've got the Oakland Raiders at the Cleveland Browns. And I alluded to this last time, and I will stick to my guns. I'm picking Oakland. I am absolutely picking Oakland because I think Oakland has looked better. And I don't even think it's been that close. Cleveland, it's just maybe that Alex Mack injury, maybe that was affecting them way more than even I gave him credit for. It's just they didn't look good last week, and Oakland has just been really competitive in all these games. One of these games, it's going to break their way, and I think this is the perfect time for it to happen. I'm not going to be entirely shocked if this is a Cleveland win. This is a game that Cleveland should win. But if I'm being 100% honest, I don't think they will. And like I said, it's the way Oakland's looked. It's the way that they've been relatively competitive. That's all it comes down to. Next up, to wrap up the day games, we've got Indianapolis at Pittsburgh. I'm taking Indy. It's open and shut. It's this Indy team, man. I don't really know if they just really are looking better than everyone thought they were, which I think is a distinct possibility. Andrew Luck is playing out of his mind, and so is the rest of the team. They're 5-2. They started off 0-2, and everyone's like, oh, between them and New Orleans, who's the one who's most likely to make the playoffs? I've been saying the whole time it was Indianapolis because their division sucks. And granted, they play in a better division than New Orleans does. But New Orleans just doesn't look good. Indianapolis has. They lost those 2 games, and they look competitive in those. Because I believe, the first game they really didn't. It was a blowout, and then Indy let up. So it was 31-24. It was a one-score game, but it wasn't that close. That Philly game definitely could have gone either way. And then from there, they have just 44-17, 41-17, 20-13 for Baltimore, 33-28 for Houston, and then 27-0 over Cincinnati. They've taken care of business in 3 of their 5 wins. That, I think they are way more dangerous than their record implies, and their record is really good. And Pittsburgh, yay, you won. But consolation prize, man. Just, I don't know. Pittsburgh is just going to be sort of middling around all season. I don't think Tomlin gets fired. I think they can at least get to 8-8. Maybe. I'm pulling the schedule up. Let's see. Versus Indy, versus Baltimore, at the Jets, at Tennessee, versus New Orleans, at Cincy, at Atlanta, versus Kansas City, and then versus Cincinnati. Excuse me. So you figure they can beat Tennessee. They're home for New Orleans at the end of November. So cold weather, so they could win that. At Atlanta, they could win that. So that gets them 3 more wins. And then, if they handle their business against New York, they've got, New York, and then if they could split against Cincinnati. They could beat Kansas City. You never know. I think this team can get to 8-8, but it depends on which team shows up. I mean, you look at their wins, and all of a sudden, they're not that impressive. They beat Houston, which doesn't look like much now, anyways. They beat Jacksonville. They blew out Carolina, and even that's not a blowout. And they barely beat Cleveland in that first game. They just haven't looked good, and they've lost to Baltimore, who has looked good. They lost to Tampa Bay, and I think that's the most startling one out of any loss on their schedule, is they lost to Tampa Bay. The only win Tampa Bay has, and then they got blown out by Cleveland. This Pittsburgh team is so all over the place, who even knows? But I don't think, despite them being everywhere and being inconsistent, they're not going to beat Indianapolis. And then Indianapolis has to start looking forward because they already lost to Denver. They got to at least keep pace with them. I don't know if you talk about Indianapolis competing for that number 1 seed with the way Denver has looked recently. They came off their bye. I mean, they were winning. They were, 2-1 going into their bye because they had the early bye. And they've just come out swinging since then. But Indianapolis, at Pittsburgh, at the Giants, versus New England, versus Jacksonville, versus Washington, at Cleveland, versus Houston, at Dallas, at Tennessee. Dallas is the only game on the schedule that looks daunting. Everything else they should be favored in. And that Dallas game is week 16. We don't know if DeMarco Murray is still playing at that point. And that's just a matter of wear and tear. That's a matter of his injury history. And it's just a matter of generally, are they resting him? You never know what that's going to look like. Those late season games, you don't get the same team. But other than that, they should be favored in all of those games, and that includes the New England game. And granted, I don't I think the Dallas and New England games, they split. But that still gets them to 13-3 if that's how it breaks. I just think Denver has the looks of a 15-1 or 14-2 because I think they will lose one. I mean, they're games that look daunting. I mean, Seattle looked daunting. They lost, but now it doesn't mean much. They've got at New England, at Oakland, at St. Louis versus Miami, at Kansas City versus Buffalo, at San Diego, at Cincinnati versus Oakland. Except for that New England game. That New England game might be their only other. Is the only game that looks losable right now. But you never win the ones that you don't always win the ones you're supposed to win. You don't always lose the ones you're supposed to lose. So who knows? They could win at New England and then lose to Buffalo. That's just how the NFL works. But if they went 15-1, it would not be shocking the way they look right now. Next up, the Sunday night game, the Green Bay Packers at New Orleans. I know New Orleans wins at home, but Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers has this team on fire. I'm still not 100%. There's something about them that I'm still not convinced about with this team. I can't put my finger on it. I know a lot of other people can say, oh, well, it's this or it's that. I don't have anything that I can put my finger on and say, this is why I don't believe in Green Bay. But there is something there that I don't believe in. The only thing I do believe in is the fact that they are tied at first place with Detroit, who could very well blow up at any given week. New Orleans has not looked good in any way, shape, or form. It's yeah, I don't know. This is it's not looking good for New Orleans because that drops them 2-5 right there, and they have a home loss. And realistically, you're looking at them at 2-5, and they play in a division where they're still in contention. But it's not a matter of record at that point. It's a matter of the fact that New Orleans could be at 2-5, not looking very good, and that's where the concerns come from. And wrapping things up, we've got this Monday night game. The Washington Redskins at the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, you got to go with the Cowboys. Colt McCoy getting the start in this one over Kirk Cousins. Assuming RG3 doesn't come back. I don't think he will. Either way, I'm taking Dallas. Like, they should just have their way with it. DeMarco Murray, go for 250. See if I care. 250 on 47 carries. Just get it done and over with. Get to 1,000 right now. This Dallas team is looking good. You know, and it's going to blow up at one point. And it's not necessarily going to blow up. I mean, DeMarco Murray could stay healthy, but eventually they are going to have to be like, you know, if they're sitting at 10-2, it's like, okay, DeMarco, we gotta limit you to about 15 carries a game for this last little stretch if we can, and keep you healthy for the playoffs. Like that's something they are going to have to start taking into consideration soon. You know, the Redskins lost Brian Orakpo. I don't pay enough attention to Washington to know if he's still as good as he was a few years ago, but he's done for the year. And I don't know, man. Just Dallas. They're just they're dominant. So just to go over the picks real quick, I'm already 1-0. I got the Denver pick right. I got Buffalo, Detroit, Kansas City, Houston, Minnesota, Seattle, Cincinnati, Miami, New England, Philly, Oakland, Indianapolis, Green Bay, and Dallas. Those are my picks. We went 8-7 last week. You know, not as good as I would like. We are 59-40 or 60-44-1 with the Thursday night prediction. You know, 120 is usually what I consider to be a pretty decent goal. We're halfway there already. We still got 9 weeks left to play. So I'm feeling confident I can get to my 120. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I am still in the beginning of the second quarter in this game. So I will continue playing through this. I will fast forward it. And I will just throw it at the end of the game. Do you guys even care? Does anyone even care about what happens in these games? Or should I just fast? I'll figure out something. Because I'm not going to save mid-game. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. And I will see you guys next time. Oh, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, please. Thank you.